What up, party people? What is the deal? What is the deal? What is the deal? Oh man, I'm looking kind of crazy right now. So let me get myself together. This is Hakeem Green, Channel Live and Direct, BDP all day, every day. All we do is spark Mad Izm over here on the Mad Izm TV. You know how it goes down, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to make sure this background is right so we can make it pop correctly. We might have to just go how it is. I don't know, I'm looking crazy. I was trying to get my boy Skateboard Mike at Skateboard Mike NYC. No, excuse me, at iSkate NYC. The homie hooked me up with the fresh crown, the Mad Izm crown. You see how it's going down, ladies and gentlemen. It's right and exact. It's kind of flavorful fly. You know, some street artwork going on, but it's very meticulous, very much the craftsmanship and time, energy, effort. The design is fire. You know, I got the official Mad Izm crown rocking. Now, he gave me one a few years ago that I rocked religiously. You can catch it in the what is it called? Life in the City. Life in the City video that I put out a few years ago. I had the Mad Izm crown rocking, and I ended up losing it in the cab, and I've been heartbroken ever since. And my boy Mike shot me a new one, so I'm rocking it. That's Mad Izm, the funky fresh crown. iSkate New York on Instagram. Check him out, look him up, and follow his whole movement because he got it going on. He doesn't just do Mad Izm products, but he does a bunch of different products, all with some type of spiritual significance, and it's just fire. So yeah, that's how he's rocking. I'm gonna take it off because I think it's messing up my flow right now with the visuals. So we're just gonna take it off like that and rock out. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play a video and get my visuals right because I'm breaking up. Got the green screen popping, but it's kind of messing up my flow. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play a video, maybe 1 or 2 videos, get my look right, invite some people to the building, and then the homie Mr. Davey D Cook, Davey D, is gonna be in the building, and we're gonna talk about some very important issues concerning hip hop and the United States in general. Yeah, and that's how we're gonna do it today on Mad Izm TV. So with that said, I'm gonna play a video, Aguilar featuring M1 and Hakeem Green. That's me, myself. The video is called We the People, produced by Aguilar off his new album, Dorona 2. So yeah, that's how we gonna rock out. So let me get that rocking. Share screen. Boom. And let me go over here. Enlarge. Hide. Play.
Aguilar. M1. Yo, the fly landed on Mike Pence. I can smell the bullshit. Trump ain't trying to concede. Let's determine the future. Everyone is a victim, but yo, so many are losing. Republican and Democrat is getting really confusion. It's an illusion. I can never depend on the system. People want power, so you more dangerous in position. We Israelites, but we still worshiping Christ. Little kids and loved ones locked up by the ice. Corona's a fight. Hope you got God in your life. The right to bear arms when the enemy is in sight. Scared of my type, and they don't want us to unite. And when they see the love and unity, that's what they don't like. A good example of what you just try to be like. Stay out the way when the police is shining them lights. We the people, we depend on the form of my birth. Self-justice, ensure domestic tranquility. Ensure domestic tranquility. Provide for the common defense. Ensure the general welfare and secure the general welfare and secure for ourselves and our prosperity. Do a day for ourselves and our Constitution. What's that called? To United States of America. Political action committee since back in the 60s. Niggas been packing blickies in the back of their black dickies. When we fast forward, we can't ignore this shit. It's deja vu. Is this a passport to bondage or black to the future? Ice Cube's brilliance must be applauded by hip-hop. Republican or Democratic, it's all just a flip-flop. Lil Wayne got a brain, he thinking, let's give him choices. This is America, the land where they silence the strong voice. You rather Kanye West or be in a test dummy for this government? What they trying to bury, I'm gonna uncover it. Fuck that nanotechnology, vaccine rap, behavioral modification. This is Robot Nation.
Politicians do not take time out to organize the community. As a matter of fact, they appear to be afraid to organize the community. But, of course, reality and truth tells us that the only way you get power is when the people are properly organized. That's our major challenge.
Through the city with my troops, through the slums, ducking cops, getting litty off the juice in my rum, ready to pop any nigga, getting loose with the tongue. We just a reflection of benign neglect. The hate produced, trying to find respect. Programmed by the TV algorithms and infomercials. Sticks and stone, break bones, the names really hurt you. Your mommy call me stupid, daddy call me never. My teacher call me slick, the hustlers call me clever. This is just perspective when the college is elective. A compromise from slavery to keep ownership protected. But people disrespected through the trials and tribulations. Staying medicated through the vials and medication. We can trace it back to Nixon, follow down through Clinton. Got my brother in East Jersey and my sister locked in Clinton. President Industrial, now CBS is slinging grams. So my brothers from the 80s still sitting in the can. Running with them boys, running from the man. Gunning with them toys, but now running out of plans.
Just organize our people because we really have the power. Oh, since 1960, we still have the power. We have some visibility, some more tricks, but as a matter of fact, the situation is getting worse. And the responsibility for organizing our people rests on each and every one of our shoulders.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Live and direct. This is your boy Hakeem Green, Channel Live. BDP all day, every day. All we do is spark Mad Izm here on Mad Izm TV. We've just been joined by an old friend of mine and one of hip hop's treasures in terms of information, organization, networking, giving context to a lot of the, issues we have pertaining to the culture and its relationship to the larger culture, which is the, USA, what have you. My man, Davey D. Davey D Cook.
How you doing? Am I coming in clear?
Your mic sounds a little crazy right now.
Okay, that's me to make sure it doesn't sound crazy.
Yeah.
How's that? No. Yes.
Nah, it's the same thing. It's sounding real crunchy. Yeah, can you use the computer mic? Maybe that might work. Yeah. Yeah, so while Dave figures it out, I think today is going to be a phenomenal discussion, very insightful. A few years ago, actually more than a few years ago, I did a talk show podcast with my brother Steele from Smith & Wesson. How you sound over there? Give me some mic check. Nah, I don't hear anything. There you go.
Can you hear it now?
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, so let me just see why this mic was not.
There you go. You sound great right now.
Okay, well then we'll just go with it.
Yeah, we sound great. So more than a few years ago, we did the talk show Illegal Broadcasters with my brother Steele from Smith & Wesson. And we had a conversation with Davey D and the great Bob Law, about the state of Black radio, which was the focus in that conversation. And this is before, I guess this information wave has kind of popped off. So, we were having discussions that, most people kind of weren't having, or, points of reference that they didn't have or didn't know about that we discussed in that conversation. And over the years in my various Facebook, debates and social media debates about what's wrong with Black music, what's wrong with hip hop, I see most folks don't have the context that you have, Dave. So, I kind of wanted to have this conversation, revisit some of those topics, and to give understanding. When we say what happened to Black radio, what happened to Black music, most folks don't understand the systemic regression of the art form and the culture. And I think that you're definitely a voice that can highlight that. So with that said, what happened to Black music? What happened to Black radio, bro? What happened?
Well, it depends on your frame of reference.
Okay.
I think Black music is fine. I see a lot of creative people. I see a lot of innovation. I see it serving the community, and I see music continuing in terms of being a function that goes beyond commodification. It's healing. It's informative. It's educational. It's inspiring. Black music is fine and dandy. Now, to me, if you're talking about its commodification and what is allowed through commodified channels, well, now we can have a conversation, and that conversation is not just limited to music, but it may be limited to just the depiction of Black people, the Black experience, society in general. So I think what we've had over the years is this scenario in commodified corporate spaces of formulas. What formulas can you come up with that will sell product? And who is the target audience in selling products? So, for example, if we're talking about Black people and Black music, we're talking about, okay, there are more white people than Black people, and these white people have more of an income stream than these Black people, and they happen to like things that, fall into a particular category. They don't want to hear Hakeem Green, talking about we the people. Some do, but if they had a choice between Hakeem and M1 and, Algala, doing a song about we the people versus, say, a song like WAP, right? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll is what sells in the industry. So let's go with the sex thing and let's find more people who can do it. Since you might not have a WAP, they may go, well, what else sells? Controversy, violence, toughness. So, put some guns in that video, rap about, moving some keys and let's get some controversy. Yeah. Instead of you and M1 rapping together, why don't you, Hakeem, get into a beef with M1? We can even manufacture it, Hakeem versus Dead Prez. Now we got something that can sell. And so those type, and I'm just being anecdotal, but it's also very real. That type of formula will net a lot of money for people who made an investment in you. So when it comes down to, promoting, can't use that. You got to get sorry about that. My son was trying to grab my charger. When it comes down to, trying to sell product and your target audience is removed from the community, then you tend to go with what that target audience likes. In radio, for example, women are always the target. Black men are not the target audience. Black men are just used to validate coolness. So if we want to say...
Why are women the target audience?
Well, the argument is twofold. One is that women tend to be a little bit more thoughtful, and they will make a decision to, buy appliances, before the man would. That's the theory. So women are taking care of the kids. And in some communities, there are more women in college than men, so you have all that type of thing. So if we can get the wife or the spouse to think about buying this computer, then we can win. Because if we leave it up to the man, he might buy a PlayStation before he buys a computer. That's the thinking.
But hold on, but wait a minute. But that's still a purchase. That's still a commerce. That's still a
Yeah, but we're talking about what are you trying to sell, and what with an advertiser, what does an advertiser want to put in front of an audience? So when I was doing commercial radio, the words that were used, interestingly, was, do you have a diverse listenership? Diverse to me and you means, do you have black and brown folks? Diverse in code speak in the industry was, do you have more than black people listening to your radio station because you're playing black music, right? So that's how that breaks down. So then you go, yeah, we actually do. In fact, I was just telling a joke the other day. Let me give you an example to kind of spell this out. So in our radio station, which was a Clear Channel one, we would give away prizes, probably leading up to Thursday when they would have the Nielsen books that were, being hung in, the ratings books. So all throughout the week, we would go, okay, caller 106, we got tickets for the movie Booty Call. So it didn't matter if it was Hakeem Allah Green who called up, or Darnell Perkins, right, from East Oakland or North Richmond. So you can, yo, son, this is me. Yo, man, this is me, right? That was cool. It didn't matter if it was, Tanisha from West Oakland, right? But when we gave away $106, or we gave away a bigger prize, then it was the unwritten rule was you listen for the accent. So we weren't counting down the numbers live. It'd be like, caller, yo, this is Hakeem Allah Green. You're caller 105. This is Tanisha, Tanisha Smith from East Oakland. You're caller 105. Hi, my name is Tiffany. Tiffany, Grifford, from Los Altos. Oh, you're caller 106. What's the station that jams, right? And then they would yell out the call letters, and then the sales team would take a recording of that, and when they went to sell the station, they would go, the ad buyer would go, do you have a diverse audience? Meaning, do you have more than just Hakeem and Tanisha listening? And they would go listen to our air check, and the air check might have, Lil Jon playing. But then it's like caller 106. Hi, this is Tiffany, Grifford from Los Altos. And they would go, oh, okay. So, everybody listens to this crunk music. Everybody listens to this trap music. And that's how that would go. So it is, it was trying to appeal to the anxiety that advertisers would have, who felt that they didn't want their product being associated with particular types of people that, fit a stereotype. So I don't want black people being the face of my product. I don't, black men being the face of the product, because it might scare my other customers away. So, I can deal with women, even black women, because if I get the right type of black woman and we can say that they're educated and go to college and all that, then, that's a sellable point. And that's just how media works in general once they lock in on an advertiser. Way back in the days, it was about acquiring, and even today, it was about attracting the white teenager. Right, Kim? We attract the white teenager who will then go to his parents who have money and convince them to buy whatever goods and services that we're selling. But it wasn't the black teenager, it was the white teenager. Can we cross our music over to the white teenager? That was the story of rock and roll. That's why they even used the name rock and roll. It's like, we're not going to call it rhythm and blues. We're going to call it rock and roll so it doesn't have a black association. So at the core of it, whether you're talking about 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, or now, you're talking about de-blackenizing the product. And the product could be the music. The product could be the people selling the music, meaning the DJ. So you have a lot of people who sound black but ain't black, right? And that was always a hot commodity. Go ahead.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I want you to expound on that particular point. But you kind of brought in more of a historical perspective that we want to kind of dig into, right? And using black culture without using black people, and tracing the history of modern music back to late 1800s, early 1900s, in this thing called coon music, which was an actual genre of music. And I'll let you go in and walk us up from there.
So coon music is an extension of blackface minstrelsy, right? The biggest form of entertainment was blackface, coming out of the 1840s and going almost 100 years in the country. It was the biggest form of entertainment. Out of it came like the vaudeville jokes and musicals and all types of things that still have a footprint today. But it was in those minstrelsy shows that you had white people dressing up and putting on blackface and then mimicking the stereotypes of black people. In that case, it started off black enslaved people and then later just black people shuffling, jiving, the whole nine. In order to get an edge, you actually had black people come on, and when you did that, they were considered authentic. So you might, they use the word Ethiopian to describe black people. That was the word that they often used. So we have authentic Ethiopian, vaudeville show. That meant like they got real black people who were dressed up in a stereotypical way, mimicking white people, mimicking black people. So that's how that happened. And then there was some people like, oh gosh, I'm forgetting Bert. I'm forgetting his name. Forgive me for having a brain fart. But you had some black people who brought extra flavor to those roles, right? They brought a sense of depth and a sense of humanity to it. And so, people would be like, okay, this is cool. But black men in particular were always relegated to being a clown figure, even when they were noble.
Okay. So we talking about, this is coming out of slavery. This is Jim Crow America, Jim Crow South. This is, black people, African Americans, however you want to, Ethiopians, however you want to refer to us, being excluded from society, but our culture directly being stolen from us and used to create finances. And some of this music financed the early record labels, the Columbias,
Right. So let's go into coon music, right?
All right, there you go.
So coon music became a bunch of these records. And if you look online, you'll see it. They were pretty explicit. We're going to send a nigga to the moon. We're going to have a nigga pick up, corn. We're going to have a nigga do this. I mean, they used the N-word like it was nobody's business. And so, yeah, they had white artists singing these songs that were, pretty insulting to black people. And, RCA was one of the main ones that pushed this. And, I'm sure Columbia and others that were around at that time also had them. Now, they eventually got rid of those records. But, yeah, those were popular and they were extensions of the whole blackface minstrelsy thing. You got to remember, if you put it into political and social context, there's a few things that were going on at the turn of the century. First, you had a real push and a blowback to what was known as Reconstruction, where black people were really making some great strides right after slavery, and they were, taking place in political circles. So they were senators and, running entire houses, the legislative houses in some states. And there was a ilk of people, the former Confederate folks, who didn't like that. And they were like, let's put a reign of terror. And that reign of terror included, running black people literally out of office, massacring them, killing them, and, coming up with this pseudoscience of, black people being inferior and having a different sort of body type and a different brain thing and just basically dehumanizing us in every way possible, whether it was in newspapers, definitely on the stage, in academia, you name it. And so those coon songs were just an extension. It's like, why do I need to care? These people aren't really real. But it was in the context of having those coon songs and then picking up a newspaper and seeing a bug-eyed, stereotypical Sambo type of character, in the newspapers. Then if you went into political arenas, it would be like a respected, senator or a respected newspaper owner or a respected, mayor of a city, warning people that we can't have black people ruling or serving office because they're incapable of doing that. That became a rallying cry, for political offices. So all that kind of went hand in hand. You can't really separate one for the other. And I don't mean to be long-winded about it, but if we don't understand the political context in which these things exist,
yes,
then you can try to explain, oh man, it was just a record. No, it wasn't just a record. It was a record, and it was, angry white folks who ran a campaign that said resist black rule, as they did in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898, and then picking up shotguns and killing people with, and telling them they can't serve office.
Just for our viewers and people who don't know the history of Wilmington, North Carolina, coming out of slavery during Reconstruction, talking about the late 1800s, early 1900s, African Americans, former slaves, were elected to political office as senators and congressmen, and the white community in the Wilmington, North Carolina area wasn't having that. Literally went into town, burned down the courthouse, the city, whatever you call that, chased black people up out of there, and
Well, let's initially, people held office and everybody was cool with it. It was very integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be clear. The stereotype of black men was that they were going to rape black women. So you had some white women and some folks who were former generals and officers in the Confederate Army who were still mad about losing, who came up and said black people have been assaulting the virtues of white women. So that was one thing that kind of rallied people up. Like, you can't be going after our women. Then it became a campaign that was aided by a newspaper that warned folks that you got to be careful because these monsters, these black men that hold office, they're going to change laws and go after our women and everything. So that became the rallying cry that was underscored by these white women. Now, really what was driving all this was that black people were actually doing quite well financially. They were successful in terms of, living the American dream. Like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah, we got our own stores. We got our own businesses. We're doing quite well. And that angered folks. And so they used the stereotype as an excuse to go after folks. It wasn't just about, people sleeping with white women. It was about, economically upending you. And this is important because as you have these coon songs at the turn of the century, you fast forward to 1915, you have a landmark movie that is at the top of the field in terms of its technology, but it also does extreme damage to black people. It was called Birth of a Nation. It was taken from a play called The Klansman, in which the Ku Klux Klan rescues the South. The South wins the war in The Klansman, and it wins the war in Birth of a Nation. And in that movie, Birth of a Nation, they show black people taking over the courthouses and running, holding office and just living up to all the stereotypes. Their naked feet on tables, their eating fried chicken, eating watermelon, and of course chasing white women, including one famous scene where the white woman jumps off a cliff to avoid having to be with a black man. And then of course at the end the Klan comes in and they save the day. That sort of stereotype, not only does it resurrect the Ku Klux Klan to make a resurgence, but it also leads to, these bloody summers where you have wholesale massacres from East St. Louis to the famous one that we now know in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of entire black communities being burnt down and attacked by, white folks who said that black people were raping white women, but it was really these black people are doing quite well and we need to put them in their place. So that's the history of it. And those stereotypical songs, those dehumanizing images all played a role, an important role in having people not see our humanity, but see us as threats that needed to be destroyed or contained.
Thinking about war and the art of war and the role that propaganda serves in war, what you just spelled out reminds me of that these, seemingly innocent images and the way we're framed in the media through stereotypes. You talking about the turn of the century 1900 is really, really hardcore, upfront in your face, the degradation of the black man and woman image. That we don't look at that, these images that are marketed to us and promoted to us as an extension of a war machine, like that keeps us in place.
Well, when you say us, who's us? Because they weren't marketing it to us. They were marketing it to the American population, using us, right? And that's real important.
Okay.
Because I think black people had the dignity and the agency and continuously fought against those images. We talk about Birth of a Nation and we forget that black people went out and did Birth of a Race, which you can see online to try and counter that. But that's been removed from the history books and nobody talks about it. They don't talk about that there were people like Booker T. Washington and others who tried to raise money to put out that movie, and that there was resistance in the black community to those stereotypes. Black people were always resisting, even if there were some that said, well, shoot, the only way I can make money is maybe to put on his black face and try to do something. At least let me try to make the best of it. But those images weren't, we had sense of understanding this ain't us, but it was marketed to the rest of the world to say, well, they may have some dignity, but let me tell you who they really are. These are people that need to be looked down upon. So, unless you see us in meaning that we're Americans, then it was us. But they were marketing it to white people and immigrants that were coming into this country, and they didn't give a damn about us as black folks.
No doubt. Definitely don't disagree with that. There's, I guess, an added effect to it in terms of our community and our relationship to it, where we see who's successful in accepting the role ascribed, and then that kind of becomes the wave over time, where it's like, man, well, fuck that positive shit. I'm gonna go over here and just do what they want me to do because this is. And then we get to a point where at now in 2020, where it's like, those groups that are fighting against the stereotype, we're still here. We're still fighting against the stereotype, but the overall messaging is, like, if you want to feed your family, you might want to sell that ass, and that's been accepted by too many people in our community. Of course, not yourself and myself. I'm not talking about us, but
what's the difference between selling your ass and making $1 million to a record label versus selling your ass and working at a bank that won't give you a loan, or working at a school, being a janitor that you can't even afford to send your kids to, or, any number of things. So that's also relative. That's all relative itself.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Or trying to recreate Black Wall Street or Wilmington, North Carolina. It's all relative. It's the same thing, no doubt. It's just getting to see how, like, the only thing that changes to me is fashion and technology. Everything else is pretty much the same. Slavery is still slavery. It's just technology makes slavery easier and more comfortable and more fashionable if you know how to flip it. You know what I mean? But it's still the relationship between the person creating the value and the person eating off the value is still the same. It's just magnified to such a degree where you're so far removed from the plantation owner, you don't realize you're on a plantation.
Well, I hear that. I think I don't want to use the word slavery because I think it's such a harsh and degrading institution that right now, as we speak, we have corporations and actual senators trying to pass laws to completely obliterate that period of time. Make it so you can't read or use in your school work the 1619 Project, and we don't want it in our textbooks. That it's a fight just to remind people of that institution. But if we're talking about existing in a capitalist society, which slavery is built upon,
slavery and chattel slavery is different.
Yeah.
When I say slavery, I don't necessarily mean chattel slavery. That's different. That you can be a slave, but not a chattel used as a mule or horse. That's different. But you can come out of chattel slavery, and essentially your relationship to the people who run the plantation is the same. It didn't change. Right. You just not changed.
That's capitalism.
Okay.
In many ways.
Yes.
That's capitalism, and so the question is, how does one survive in a capitalist society? You know, what does that look like? Hold on a second. What does that look like? Hold on a second. Okay. So yeah, it's you know, the challenge that we as Black people have always had is that we're trying to figure out how I can make a better way for myself and how I can be financially sound. And people will look for, you know, easy ways or easier ways to improve their lives. So we may say, you know what? I will put my body on the line and play football or basketball or baseball or boxing. And, you know, and it's really for the enjoyment of the masses, primarily white folks. And people, you know, we can say all those sorts of things. You know, LeBron James is a high-priced slave and Steph Curry's a high-priced slave. And others could look and say, these are folks that are trying to figure out how to navigate a system, and they're making $100 million and $200 million. And they take that money and they reinvest it in the community. So, you know, they're moving, they're progressing. You know, some people would see it as progress. Other people will say just the mere fact that you went on a field that you don't own is a continuation of a relationship that we need to, you know, crack once and for all. I don't think that's very practical for the majority of people who, you know, who we come across. Family and friends is like, yo, go get that bag, go get that money. And if you scale it down a bit, there was a time when somebody said, yo, man, go put that black face on and go get that money, man. You know, it's better than sharecropping. You know, because in sharecropping, they were whipping us like you were really in chattel slavery. They were forcing us to till the land, and we had nothing to show for it at the end. But you put on this black face, and you're able to make $1 million, Burt Williams, or, you know, you put on that black face, and you're able to, you know, make some money. The Lincoln, who was playing Amos and Andy and what have you, then go do you. Or Hattie McDaniel, be the mammy if you need to. As she said, I'd rather make $7,000 playing a maid than $7 being a maid. And, you know, we can look at it and critique it, and I do at times, but we also have to look at the harsh realities that many were facing. And
I'm not trying to degrade anybody's individual experience, right? So there's the micro and the macro, right?
Right.
And a lot of what I'm saying is applicable to myself as well. And I understand that I'm in a system where I have to function and eat every day. Like I'm in a fishbowl. I have to eat what's in the fishbowl so I can figure out a bigger fishbowl, a bigger source of a bigger environment, right? Okay, so, you know, we get that, right? But on the macro, right, if I have the ability to create a system where, you know, I can limit your perception of choices, right? Mm-hmm. All right, then I can force you to do something, quote unquote, without actually forcing you to do it. Still your choice, but I've skewed reality in a way for you where, like Carter G. Woodson said, Miseducation of the Negro, you know, though I don't tell you to go back to the back door, when I've successfully created a mental slave, he'll go to the back door without being told. And if there is no back door, he'll create one. He'll make one for himself. So as a community in the macro sense, that's where we find ourselves. And it's not just black people, because we know white people were slaves too, though they were chattel slaves. A position was created for them. And because, you know, of circumstances, historical and otherwise, they've chosen to play a position to keep a system of race going, even though we know race is not a real thing. They've chosen a position which makes them slaves to the same system, actually. But that's from a macro. But then there's the micro on an individual level, right? You know, I have the opportunity to make my individual situation better in this thing. And then I can hopefully make a better choice when I get there, right? And you can't fault people for that.
So let's build on that, right? So I make an individual choice. And the challenge we have is that in my individual choice, I get put into a machine, I get elevated, it gets amplified, and then it becomes the standard in which everybody's judged, and that becomes the challenge that we have. Yeah. So Hakeem Green makes a choice to do quote unquote positive, socially aware, politicized music. Davey D makes a choice to do degrading music. Every woman is a bitch and a hoe, you know, everybody is a gangster, and, you know, whatever thing that I need to do. and they look, somebody comes along and says, he made a choice and he made a choice. Now, I like Dave's choice. Let's take him. Let's put $1 million budget around him, and let's send, let's dress it up and let's send it around the world. And then we'll have somebody who's hip and cool and says, Dave is representing what's real. He's what's real in the community. Mm-hmm. And so we all live and die by my elevation, which gets us into the conversation we're having now. Because ideally, you might say to me, well, I wish you didn't make that choice, right? And we can go back and forth on that. Mm-hmm. And I would say that may be valid if me and you have a relationship and we're having a discussion and we're trying to figure out, did I really need to make that choice or not? Mm-hmm. I had $1 million in the bank. How much more did I need? Mm-hmm. Versus going after the institution that perpetuates that. And that becomes the hard part.
Right. That and that's what I agree with you 1000%. Don't disagree at all. It's really it's the micro versus the macro. There's in the movie The Cotton Club, right? Mm-hmm. The way Bumpy Johnson is framed relative to Gregory Hines is playing one of the Nicholas brothers, right? And Gregory Hines wants to get back, right? Now Bumpy Johnson is the super duper gangster, right? He's the guy, the negative guy who, he's the guy but Bumpy Johnson being able to step outside the fishbowl and look at himself in the fishbowl and then go, okay, I understand I'm in the fishbowl, but young brother, you got to do something different. Like, you can do something. You have other choices. I'm gonna kill him my way. You kill him your way. Right now, two different individuals. But the point is not to judge those two individuals, but to look outside the fishbowl and go, well, why are they in this fishbowl to begin with?
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's kind of where I'm going with even like the historical context, because when you see Columbia Records, CBS, put out the song Nigga Love Watermelon, ha ha ha. They put that record out, and then you would say this is the same institution that in 2020, even though it's going through its many transformations and manifestations, and over the 100-year period, 100 and some odd period, it's still the same institution, really.
Right. No, I agree. Hold on a second.
Mm-hmm. And because I brought up Columbia and CBS, we definitely have to talk about the Harvard music study. But I was hoping we could get to even like, what we were talking about in that conversation with Bob Law, the impact of our culture through radio and the civil rights movement and the change that happened and the different points that kind of give us perspective.
Right. So, it's interesting about Columbia. Let me just check one thing just to make sure, since I'm next to a computer.
Oh, yeah. Fact check it. It blew my mind when I saw it.
Yeah. I just want to make sure about something here. But okay. So let me just one more person. Give me a second.
Yo, peace to everybody in the building. Lays Elliott, DJ Dax.
Okay.
What's up? Supreme Elevation piece.
So Columbia has an interesting record in this regard. Mm-hmm. When you go back and you get somebody like Charles Mingus, the jazz player, mm-hmm. and he does, I'm going to do a protest song, ode to Fabius. And he's talking about, the governor of Arkansas when they were trying to integrate schools, mm-hmm. right? And he calls them out, Columbia's like, nah, we ain't putting that record out. So Mingus has to put it out elsewhere. Billie Holiday does Strange Fruit, same thing, right? So what we're looking at is people who made individual choices, and then the machinery, when they saw that they were exercising their agency to do something for the community, was like, nah, we ain't gonna, not on my watch, not through my means, not on my, not on, my plantation will these records be. Go do it elsewhere. And so you always run into that sort of situation. And that's just something to note. And then you wanted to talk about, the study that was done in Harvard, which was really, became like a little book that you can.
Before you go there, right, it's important for folks to understand, from what I got from our last conversation on this, was that radio broadcasters, artists, musicians, Black music got behind the civil rights movement at some time.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And was very impactful in unifying people, bringing people out, what have you. And not to say that there's a direct relationship to the Harvard Music Study, but the Harvard Music Study, kind of the effect of it broke that connection to some degree. So I want to kind of.
Well, it showed white folks, in particular Clive Davis, how to market Black music, how to take that, how to commodify it more efficiently and effectively. It's also in the backdrop of understanding that Black musicians were looking at the Black Power movement, the Civil Rights movement, and there was an understanding that these were folks that had loud voices and could be tremendously influential. So in order to really understand that relationship, you have to look at the role that people like Dr. King and Harry Belafonte played in that, and to a degree Malcolm and the Nation of Islam as well. So with Dr. King, he clearly understood that there needed to be a strategic and a very intentional relationship between him between the civil rights movement and Black entertainers. And so he sought that out and had a plan of action, which included having a council of elders, making sure that all the entertainers got the information about the civil rights movement, so that if a microphone was thrust in their face and they go, Hakeem, what's going on? You weren't sitting there just making stuff up. You actually had talking points, staying in touch with them. So supporting them, not just saying, hey, I need you to do this, but actually being a fan and showing up. There's a book that's written about this in great detail. It's called Kingmaker. A big shout out to Marcus Goodloe, somebody who comes out of the music industry and is now a preacher out of Compton. He wrote this book and he details all the ways in which Dr. King, engaged Black entertainers. He talks about when King went up to Nichelle Nichols, who was like the only Black person on Star Trek. She was ready to quit, and he was like, Dr. King showed up and it's like, nah, you can't quit. You gotta hold this position. Little girls look up to you. So, I support you. And she was like shocked that he even watched the show. And so King wasn't somebody who just showed up. He was like, nah, I watch the show every week. He had a good relationship with Dorothy Dandridge. These are things you can see online. Nichelle Nichols talks about that online. Dorothy Dandridge is, introducing Dr. King to 50,000 people at the Hollywood Bowl or something. And she's talking about the civil rights movement. Harry Belafonte, who's still with us, was approached by King, and he sat down and they formed a friendship and relationship where Harry went out and got all of those entertainers to speak and be present strategically to give money for the civil rights era. And so it was a very intentional thing in which this happened. You saw that with the Nation of Islam to a degree, hence Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X and the Nation and, and other figures who were drawn in, they were mentored, they were literally, coached up and had a politic that they could articulate to the world, which became important. I think both organizations clearly understood that America would listen to a baseball or a football player or a boxer before they was going to listen to somebody on the ground doing this work. And so, they figured out how to have that sort of relationship. I don't know if we have that relationship today. And that's something that we should learn from the past. Pick up that book and read it, because it didn't happen by accident. It was very intentional. Somebody like Lorraine Hansberry, she steps to Nina Simone. Nina Simone just didn't come out and start being political. Lorraine Hansberry, who was politicized, steps to her and it's like, they just blew up this church. What are you going to do, sister? Because Lorraine, Nina Simone, she even says, I was just trying to be a pianist. Nah. They just blew up the church at 16th Street Baptist Church. What are you going to do? You know, and that's how she winds up doing the song Mississippi Goddamn. That's what leads her into the politicization. James Brown just didn't do Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. If you go online right now, he did a song called America's My Home. It was the precursor to LL Cool J doing a song called Accidental Racist.
Wow.
It was in the middle of the Black Power movement. Right?
How you gonna make that song? Right? Exactly, right?
So the Panthers stepped to James Brown. A-Trap Brown, Jamil Al-Alamein, right? Political prisoner, is the one that ran into James Brown in Harlem, and they had a meeting, and it was basically, brother, you got to step it up. You just can't do songs like this. And it was after that meeting that James Brown does Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Now, he flipped the meaning a little bit because he said Black power is green power, but that's not what Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, that's not what Black power meant. Yeah. But these things happened because there were folks in the community that had relationships with these entertainers, and they influenced them.
Yeah, and they understood the power of the image. They understood what these icons meant to the everyday average person who wasn't necessarily politically savvy and wasn't into. And everybody ain't supposed to be that. No, everybody's not supposed to be Davey D or Hakeem Green or Karis, one of Chuck D. Everybody's not supposed to be there. But there's that connection, that connectivity, even if when it's rough sometimes, to say, hey, listen, there's something bigger than what they want you to do. Your people need you to do something, and the power of the image, the voice, all of that. Now, that culminates in terms of our last conversation for me, and listening to you and Bob Law speak about it, was in '67 when Dr. King addressed the National Association of Black Broadcasters.
It's called NATRA, National Association of Television and Radio Announcers.
There you go.
So it's a Black organization. It's August 11th, 1967. Dr. King steps into that.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm sorry. Two things. Black August.
Yeah.
Second thing.
The birth of hip hop. 5 years later, hip hop is born.
Thank you. Boom.
Okay, so August 11th, 1967, Dr. King speaks to this large body of people, National Association of Television Radio Announcers. And in that speech, he talks about the important role the Black radio DJ played in furthering the civil rights struggle. And he talks about, he's very specific, he's very detailed. He ain't no beating around the bush, ain't no like misinterpretation. He's like, look, Purvis Spam, Georgia Woods, to Paul Jones. He's naming off all the, Magnificent Montague. He says, they blamed you, Magnificent Montague, who was out in LA, for the Watch riots because you told, you had a slogan that said, burn, baby, burn. And the police told you you can't use that slogan no more because people use it as a rallying cry, when they was, blowing up Watts, after police misconduct. He's written a whole book on that himself, Magnificent Montague.
But we're mad at the fund the police. Just on the side.
Yeah. So he did, so he talks about that. And in the speech, he says, look, the language of soul is what allowed the gaps between the races to be built. And he talks about those Black radio DJs bringing the language of soul music to the masses. And he talks about the Kennedys doing the same dances as we are and listening to the same music. And he talks about the power of culture. And then he goes on to talk about income inequality and redistribution of wealth, and making taking a brotherhood into taking a neighborhood into a brotherhood. I forget the actual saying, but it's a very, very powerful speech, which incidentally was put out on a record, a souvenir record. So that's just So I bring that up because King was very clear. Now, what's interesting about that is that the next year, right, all those radio DJs, they were like, yeah, man, let's take it up a notch. Let's start buying radio stations and let's flex our muscle even more. So, Ricky Vincent, who wrote The History of Funk, and you should get him on your show. He wrote this book called Party Music. He details that after that year, the next year, organized crime syndicates come and they break up the NATRA convention and basically shut it down. It was like, nah, y'all ain't going to have this politic. You're not going to get this politicized.
Wait a minute. You mean the gangsters got involved?
Yeah, black gangsters and Italian gangsters. Yeah, they came up in there. And yeah, so the whole thing, he writes about it and he talks about it. And so NATRA ceased to exist afterward. What comes out of that is Jack the Rapper, Jack Gibson, who is like a premier, black radio DJ that everybody should know because he's the, let me just give you his relationship with Dr. King. He's on a station in Atlanta called WERD, and in it, and it is right above the SELC headquarters. And the story used to be that when King needed to do an activity, he would bang his broom on the ceiling and they would send a mic down to him and he would make the announcement and Jack the Rapper would dress it up. Let's play the right records. Let's, talk it up. Let's make it sound, sexier than, Summer Jam. Right. And so King had a apparatus that could amplify his voice. So that relationship between King and Jack Gibson is an important one that's almost been erased from history. But you can see pictures, you can see you see the station and you see the SELC headquarters there. So
I'm ashamed that I didn't know that.
Well, a lot of people don't know that, I'm sure Bob Law knows it. Bob would know that, but but the point that I'm getting at is that these folks, they did organizing, they did what they needed to do, but it wasn't done in a vacuum. There were people that was on board. There were very intentional relationships with these people, and King lays that out. It's like there ain't no, he says it, ain't no civil rights movement if it wasn't for black radio DJs who played a role. Now, the reason why I emphasize this, so walk with me for a minute.
Please, come on, let's go.
So NATRA is destroyed in 68, right? And you fast forward to 1979, 1980. There's the Jack the Rapper convention. There's a record of this. There's an actual record, final record. I have it. Minister Farrakhan speaks to a similar body of black radio DJs. It's an incredible speech if you ever get a chance to hear it. And he's talking. It's in Atlanta, same place where King gave his speech. And he's saying, white folks is in the business of mind control. And he walks you through how broadcasting is used as a weapon against the people. And he said, you and black music are used as an instrument to degrade the black community. He says, can you get down? Can you talk nasty? Can you talk jive? You get the job. And he's pointing out what happened in radio where they said there was a changing of the guard. They now started to bring a certain type of black person and elevated their voices. And he said, when people talk and you can't talk back, that's dangerous. He says, then you start to control their minds and you control their image and you control the perception that they even have of themselves. If you ever get to hear that entire speech, it is one for the ages.
You said you have it?
Oh yeah, it's on record.
Maybe we can have you on the show and you can play it. Possibly.
It's a 2-hour speech.
Hey,
minister.
2 hours.
Right. But the minister talks in great detail about that. And the reason why I bring this up, because you want to know what happened between 1967 and 1979 when he gave that speech.
Right.
So now there's a change in radio. And radio goes, we can't have all these black people just coming up here, just talking willy-nilly. Let's start to pull back. So several things happen. They start to not call black radio. They came up with the name urban. Why do you call it urban? So that you can imply that everybody listens to the radio station so that everybody can buy advertisement. So let me explain what's going on. We'll use New York as an example.
Okay.
New York has 3 black radio stations, WLIB, WBLS, which is owned by Percy Sutton at the time, and there's another one that will come to mind, right? New York in the 70s is about 30-40% black, right? So if you only got 3 stations and you got 70 on the dial, and the rule is whoever has the most listeners gets to charge the highest advertising rate, guess who wins? right? The black stations, because everybody's tuned into that station.
That's right.
So they started to change the rules a little. And it's like, it's not no longer who has
Listeners.
it's who has the richest listeners. So you can make the argument, yeah, Hakeem's radio station, they got 100 black people, but they only make $3 an hour. Dave has this white radio station. He only got 20 listeners, but they make $20 an hour. So we got the richest listeners, so we get to charge the highest advertising rates. This, in turn, forces black radio to de-blacken itself and say, hey, we're urban. Everybody listens to the station. If you go online right now and look at some of the commercials for WBLS, you start to see there's this deracialization. Like, you'll see them roller skating. Are they black? Are they Puerto Rican? You know, they're urban. And they started to use the word urban, right, to do this. The person who came up with this format, why am I forgetting his name? I'm gonna remember his name. There's a guy who comes up with a format. No.
Before him?
No, it's a certain. Oh gosh. Anyway, there's a format that says more music, less talk. That is what emerges in the 70s, and what it basically meant is that we're going to give you like 30 seconds to talk, like. And you're going to make an announcement. We're going to have a clock for you. You just can't get up there and do like Magnificent Montague and go, hey, Malcolm X is in town, which he did. Let me play this James Brown record, Say It Loud. You know, well, that wouldn't have been out at the time. But he would do an interview with Malcolm X and play the hottest record and then come back, right? So you're being educated and informed at the same time, right? And entertained. But now it's like more music, less talk, follow the clock. So when you're in radio, it's like you can talk at 10 after, and you're going to talk 30 seconds over the record, and you're going to be like, hey, this is Hakeem Green. You're tuned in to Hot 97, and we got Summer Jam coming up. Then they're going to let you talk at 20 after because the music is already programmed for you. So 20 after, you just listen to the brand new, record by Dead Prez and Mariah Carey. And caller number 3, we got, we got tickets for a movie. Then you're going to talk at 22, and you're going to go, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking for the 15th caller to go to Summer Jam. And then, so you can literally.
It's very structured. It's
very structured.
Yeah.
And you can go like, when you do a shift, you're only going to talk 12 times in 3 hours. And we're going to control those 12 times. So that's how that was working in radio. And
this happened, you say, when this happened in the 80s then?
No, this is in the 1970s.
1970s. Okay.
Right. So I'm gonna look. I have my.
I really like as you take. I remember on BLS, especially on the weekends, you would always hear Malcolm X speeches in the morning. You hear, Frankie Crocker do his thing. You hear Kenny Webb.
Well, Frankie was
they would talk more. It was more of a relationship with the person, whoever your radio host was. It was more of a connection. It wasn't as choppy as stage.
Yeah. Hold on a second. I'm just trying to, I have this thing on my, and I apologize for that.
No, it's all good. Man, you dropping so many jewels. I know our viewers are getting a wealth of information. And I appreciate you for taking the time, bro, because this is an important conversation.
And it just bothers me. I'm forgetting his name. And I'm the one that teaches this. It's just bothering me. It'll come up because he recently died, But anyway, so there was a format change, and it basically silenced most people. Sure, you had your Frankie Crockers and your Ken Webbs that were able to expand beyond that and speak a little. But for the most part, most people, it was like you're under control. So by the time, unless you were doing morning shows, most people, you just had to, lock it down. And if they let you out to speak, then your speaking had better be, as we call forward momentum. Like, Hakeem, why were you talking about Malcolm X? And what does that have to do with Summer Jam? We're trying to push Summer Jam, So what does that have to do with the music we played? So it was always going to be this forward momentum, not just you sitting up there just talking for the sake of talking. Did I lose you? I might have lost him.
Yeah,
I lost you for a minute. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I had to I got this green screen going, and I'm in a different room, and the lighting just kind of switched up on me, so I had to make an adjustment. I know it's kind of dark in here, ladies and gentlemen, but it's all good because Davey D is dropping some jewels on us.
So you there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Yep.
So when Farrakhan gives his speech in 1979, 1980, he's really reflecting, the type of image control that was now wrestled away from Black folks, and now is going to be put in the hands of mainly white program directors, or at least white companies, who are then going to play up, to the stereotype and the hipness of Black people, and not necessarily the political intelligence. And so that's just something that we need to keep in mind. It's in that backdrop that hip hop is born. The other thing that was happening with this format change is that they started playing disco, not just, Philadelphia disco, with Gamble and Huff, but we're talking about John Travolta disco, the disco that, when we were coming up in New York, we didn't really like that much, which is why when we went to, parties, we was like, let me get this percussive breakdown, these break beats. That's what we was into. And in many ways, it was in response to a lot of the watered down disco, not the disco that you heard at Paradise Garage with Larry Levan, but disco you might hear at Studio 54, so it was, so you had that change as well going on. And so the minister, he's giving a speech, and he's breaking all that down. And he says, you and Black music, your heads are going to roll because you dumb down the community. He doesn't use that word, but he might as well have. He talked to it's a powerful speech. He really goes off, and you got to ask yourself, what the hell is going on that Dr. King, speaking to the same body of people, is praising them, and the minister is saying, man, y'all are setting the movement backwards.
Now, there was something that happened in between Dr. King's speech and Minister Farrakhan's speech that you mentioned earlier, which I don't know if it's a missing piece to understanding that, but that's the Harvard music study initiated by Clive Davis while at CBS in '72. Right.
So that goes on, and that's basically, I don't know how much of an impact that had on the radio format. It may have gone hand in hand, but basically that study is like, look, this is how you sell Black music. This is how you penetrate these markets. These are the steps that you take. I have the book.
Yes. What he's about to introduce to you, to the listeners and the viewers is a missing piece to me in understanding what happened to quote unquote Black music, or just understanding why don't we control our messaging? Why don't we control our industry, our creative industry? The creativity comes from us. We generate it. And when you understand the power of Black creativity and commerce in the economy and how much money Black people are actually generating, there was a time before what he's about to talk about that we controlled that. And then, after that, over the years, it's been effectively taken from us or given away, depending on how you look at it, because like you said, we have choices, and as individuals, you have your own agency to do whatever you like. But the more you step outside the fishbowl and understand how it operates, the better you can understand your positioning and what you should be looking for, where the real wealth is, where the real power is, and myself coming into the industry ignorant, just wanting to be the artist and having to learn, to experience. You bump your head, you make a lot of mistakes, you do a lot of dumb things, looking at the wrong goal, the wrong focus. And these types of conversations really, for me, help me understand what my greater focus is in terms of the platform, how I want to use my platform, myself as individual, my particular branding, what I want to associate myself with, so forth and so on. So yeah,
I may have that book over at school because I use it when teaching, so I don't have it on me right now. But you can get it. It's in many ways, it's you ever hear the dog whisper? The dog whisper?
Mm-hmm.
That's what that book was. It was like, look, I'm going to tell you, going to show you guys how to be hip and cool and how to really market, you know, how to capture the urban market, how to sell urban, you know, music. And it lays out a lot of things that, you know, that are here today.
Yeah.
You know, when you talked about control, there were some people that controlled. I mean, Barry Gordy obviously controlled Motown. And, you know, I'd be remiss to say that even though Barry Gordy is depicted as somebody who is reluctant to tarnish his brand, the Motown brand, with, you know, political stuff, eventually he did. I mean, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and others kind of had to fight Barry to do those songs. Norman Connor, you know, the producer, you know, I mean, Norman Whitfield, the producer, you know, he really fought, you know, to make sure the Temptations put out those records, you know, Edwin Starr with his anti-war song. But Barry Gordy himself, you know, he was like, we're the sound of young America, and he had a brand and he had a format that he followed. He also was like, you know, he did have a black label too, a label that, you know, had Elaine Brown from the Black Panthers on there, which he's talking about literally killing cops, you know, had Stokely Carmichael on there, you know, was raising money for King by selling speeches. So they, you know, he did his part as well. And it you know, I want to just make sure that we know that. And then of course you had Stax Records and, you know, and what they were doing down there as well. So folks were all trying to do their thing, but, you know, were they in complete control? You know, distribution was always something that you had to fight against, you know.
We've never controlled that part of the game. So
and at that time you didn't have the internet, so you had to go through somebody who's like, I don't know if I want your records in these stores. I don't know if I want it coming down this pipeline. You know, Curtis Mayfield is a very important person, you know, in terms of putting messages into music and understanding the importance of that. And of course, Sam Cooke, who was one of the early people to own his own label and had to stand up to those, you know, organized syndicates who wanted a piece of the pie. Him and Muhammad Ali were good friends.
Yeah, like, you know, James Brown, you know, aside from the Black and I'm Proud song that you just clarified, put more context around, James Brown's not noted as the, you know, the most revolutionary, you know what I mean? Like, he's not Ali, he's not, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that he owned his publishing and he owned, you know, I don't know if he owned his label or he's, you know, he was the first Black to do a lot of things in terms of ownership. Well, James ran into problems too, and he talks about it because by the time the disco craze comes along, there's a white dude that's actually producing for him and giving a disco sound, and he does this whole album on disco, and he was like, man, they took my soul away. He says it, not me. So, you know, there's a lot of battles within the entertainment front as to who gets to control what, and more importantly, who gets to speak to the masses and how. And that's always in flux. But it doesn't, when it does happen, it doesn't happen by accident. It's very intentional. I want to fast forward a little because, you know, hip hop also continued that legacy as well. And the person you got to get on is Paradise Gray, you know, who was heading up the Latin Quarter, right? And to talk about the very intentional meeting of the minds that they had with all those artists and community people, where they're like, look, we're going to fight apartheid. We're going to stop wearing the gold chains. We're going to put on these African medallions, and we're going to start, you know, trying to use our collective power as hip hoppers to do something. I mean, it's because of the meeting of the minds. You see Queen Latifah do that, you know, that anti-apartheid video in The Ladies First. It's because of the meetings of the minds. You see KRS with, you know, Malcolm in the back. You know, it's those conversations. Daddy-O from Stetsasonic is, you know, a perfect person to speak on with that. You know, he'll tell you there's a reason why they were doing those, you know, hooking up with Jesse Jackson and doing, you know, those anti-apartheid records. It was because people sat in a room and was like, what can we do? You know, not too dissimilar from what King and others did during the Civil Rights Movement, not too dissimilar from the types of strategies that, you know, folks like the Panthers were deploying. Now, people may not have had the same politics, and they may not have been serving the community the same way in terms of doing free breakfasts or, you know, sitting in at lunch counters, but it was still, you know, the road was paved because there were people who sat in a room and said, let's try to do something
that's going to uplift the community. And that's a very, very important chapter just in hip hop alone. That, you know, I'm glad that Dice wrote that book. There's a book where he talks about it in there. You know, there was an attempt to do a documentary on it. It's a very, very important story and a part of history that should not be neglected. And you can see similar type of efforts with the Good Life Cafe and its emergence in LA, or the Upper Room in the Bay Area, where you have folks that are saying, we're going to be a collective, let's do something. Or even Rebel Diaz and what they were doing in the Bronx, you know, just a few years, even to this day.
To this day, yeah.
To this day.
I do 24 Hours of Peace in North New Jersey with Roz Barack. Everybody knows about that. And that's in the spirit. That's that same spirit. That's that, you know, people's kind of setting an example and resonating. And, you know, for me coming up in the late 80s with the hip hop, you know, watching it go from, you know, Rakim kind of like really putting that staff in terms of, even though his rhymes wasn't say the most conscious, he gave off an aura of consciousness, an aura of, you know, and then
he made it cool to do it.
Yeah, and then X-Clan. Now that you bring up Paradise Gray.
Yeah, well, X-Clan was a part of that, the Black Watch movement.
Yeah. And
so the point that I'm getting at is that, you know, you had organizations. You had the Nation of Islam. You had the Black Watch movement, right? You had the Nations of Gods and Earth, then known as 5 Percenters, right? But again, so people get a full appreciation of it, what's going on at that time. So in Dr. King's day, when he's sitting there meeting with artists, you have oppressive Jim Crow, people getting killed for walking into the white, you know, drinking from the white water fountain. People are getting killed for riding a bus, or, you know what I'm saying, I'm going to sit on these buses and I'm going to, you know, I'm going to try to test the law. I'm going to try and see if the law will be enforced. I have a right to do the freedom rides, and they're burning up buses, right? And killing people. They're shooting Medgar Evers, you know, when he's walking and saying, I'm going to exercise my right to vote. This is when King is doing his work. Right, the Panthers, when they're doing it with the Emory Douglases and what have you, and the Black Arts movement is in full swing. You have the backlash, right, to the civil rights movement. You have the Black Power movement. So Newark is exploding. You know, Detroit is exploding. Right, the police are trying to go full throttle to stop the Black Power movement and, you know, use the Panthers as a way to bludgeon it, right? You know, Fred Hampton is killed. All that is happening, but that's the backdrop in which these folks are operating. When we get into the 80s, you know, the so-called golden era at the Latin Quarter, what do you have? You have this devastating biochemical warfare being waged against us. It's in the backdrop of the crack era. Right? People walking in with their big gold chains. Now, brother, you're going to put on an African medallion. Word? No, I'm not. No, I think you are. No, I'm not. I think you are. You know, I mean, that's the type of conversations.
To that point, you brought up Paradise Gray, who was the lead, you know, he was the promoter at the Latin Quarter, which was the hottest New York City hip hop club
in the country.
In the country. Latin Quarter was just, and it was thuggery, like it was extra thug. This dude would be in Gucci, Louis Vuitton, whatever the hottest fashion,
wearing his sheepskin, which
only the most thorough dude could wear rope chains and jewelry. Like if you wore that, you was getting smashed out. Wasn't nobody touching Paradise Gray. It wasn't going down. He went from that to African medallions. You know what I'm saying? One of the founders of X-Clan, the most culturally expressive group maybe ever.
Well, but in order to understand Black Watch, you got to understand the role that Sonny Carson plays, right? And you got to look at the education of that. And I bring all this up to say that, you know, why was he able to do it? Because he was a former Spade, right? So, you know, coming out of Bronxdale Project. So you took his chain. There, you know, there was a force that was not going to let that happen. You know, you had Black Watch, which, you know, there was a, you know, look what they were doing when they marched across the Brooklyn Bridge. They're not running from the police in the video. Watch it, right there. You know, so I bring all this to say that the key word here is intentionality. Let's sit down and let's use this collective talent to change the direction. And so the golden era that we talk about is born out of that. You know, I mean, Native tongues is the offspring of that whole movement, right?
Yeah.
Right. And native tongue in turn gives birth and lets people know, like, you know what, I can be fly and I can be myself, you know, and I can be conscious.
Yeah.
And so that is not by accident. That is very, very intentional. And it was people looking and saying, how can we take our collective talent and do something?
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think you find moments like that at different points in time where people sit down and say, let us do something. I mean, you know, when Tupac comes along, right? He's not by himself. And he's not just with Digital Underground. You know, he's politicized by Mutulu Shakur, right?
That's right.
Political prisoner, right?
Yeah.
He's politicized, you know, with Layla Steinberg, you know, who is doing the spoken word thing, you know, here. He comes into a group that, you know, Digital Underground, for people who don't know, initially was going to be called the Spice Regime. And you want to know what their uniforms were? You know what their outfit was? Berets and sunglasses. You know why they didn't do it? There was a group called Public Enemy that showed up before they did. And so they was like, let's go in another direction. They was into funk and they said, we'll emphasize the funk more than we'll do the political stuff. But that was important because Shock and all of them, Chop Master Jay, they were coming with a political understanding. So when the group forms, you know, you have not one, but you got two people who are the sons and daughters of Panthers. You know, Money B's dad is a Panther. Tupac's mom is a Panther. So you had that connection already. And so with it, with all their zaniness, there was still a political understanding of things that were higher. And when it was on the road, you know, my man Sleuth will tell you they had people that were of consciousness that worked with them. So those things are important. And those things, I think, help pave a way for hip hop to go.
Context is everything. And, you know, through my travels,
and this is just one region, Hakeem. We're not talking about New
York.
York.
South,
we're not talking the South, where you can find similar type of things.
Right. But it's the one constant theme that I hear is we need more conscious artists. And I'm like, no, we don't. We got plenty of conscious artists. We need more conscious marketers. We need more conscious program directors, more conscious PR folks, more conscious label execs. Like, and not that everything has to be radical and militant, just understanding context and how to, you know, fight back the isms, all the isms that exist. How do we put it in check? Even if we can't do anything about it at the time, to acknowledge that this exists and we're going to fix it at some point is a step, you know? And a lot of times we don't even look at it like that. It's like, I got to do what I got to do. Man, I said, all right, cool. I understand you got to do what you got to do. However, once you've done that, then what? Are we going to repeat the cycle over and over again? You know?
And you know, and to your point, I think there's different levels or different positions people can play in consciousness.
Yes.
Now, you know, when we came up, it was important to have somebody say, fight the power, or you must learn, because they were the ones with the big microphones and there was nothing else to counter. There was nothing else, you know, they were breaking ground for us, right? In the age of social media, I don't necessarily need you to do that for me anymore, right? You know, there's other people that can speak more directly to these issues. I can go online and see whatever community leader that I want. You know, they're all there, and I can soak up their wisdom. But I think the role that artists have played have been, you know, very pointed in other ways. So it can be like, let me help finance. So people forget who paid for the Million Youth March. Can we say Master P?
Wow.
Remember, Master P wrote the check, right? Early on, right? Crazy. So while everybody's like, well, why, you know, you just saying, make them say, Master P was like,
nah,
I got your check.
I made them say more than,
There's a bunch of artists and athletes that I definitely know that were financing a lot of folks and saying, hey, man, you know, if y'all go in jail, don't worry, I got this. You know, I got this. No, don't put my name out there because my brand is this, but I got that.
It's all right.
Let me give you an example. When Katrina happened, I did an interview with David Banner. And David Banner, you know, sat up and he told me,
Salute
you know,
to him.
all the money that Young Jeezy gave him at a time, because David Banner came off his tour. He came off of the hottest record he ever had in his career, which was Play, and he dedicated himself to you know, I think he had Heal the Hood, and they was trying to shut it down because it wasn't a 501c3. So Nelly came along with his organization and chipped in and helped him put it up, and then Young Jeezy gave him a boatload of money, right, to really do the things that he needed to do. And he made mention of it, and then he told me, he said Young Jeezy was upset with him because he didn't want people to, you know, he was like, I didn't do this for publicity, but it gave him like $250,000. And so you know, so when you look at that, at least that's what he told me, you know, that says, okay, so people understand their position. I don't necessarily need Young Jeezy to do the conscious song, but if Young Jeezy was, you know, stepping up and helping somebody who was doing, you know, some real work at the time,
that's right,
then it's the community doing what it does best.
Yeah,
I got your money. I need you to go speak. I'm going to write the article. You're going to do the radio show. You're going to organize the troops, and we can move as a unit. And there's a lot of that going on. That's what Nipsey Hussle was really working at.
Salute to Nipsey Hussle. Rest in peace.
That's what Nipsey was doing when he was, you know, there were a lot of these, you know, behind the scenes conversations. It didn't need to be on YouTube and IG Live, but these were things that people were talking about and trying to do. And you know, it couldn't happen unless other things were made. It might have been a 24 hours a piece. It might have been a gang truce piece in LA. It might have been, you know, some backdoor meetings and alliances built with folks. It might have been somebody putting on genie pants so they can go, oh, rap is nice. Let's go fill up a stadium, while at the same time they may be doing some other things behind the scenes, right? That would have been somebody like a Hammer or somebody, right? So everybody had roles to play. And it didn't mean that just because you was an artist that you needed to be the one to speak. Some artists are really good. Rebel Diaz, yourself, M1, Dead Prez, others are, you know, Speech from Arrested Development, Asad Rock, and others, you know, can really speak to the issues.
But everybody doesn't need to be that. No.
Yeah, but not everybody. You know, it's like, hey, man, you know, you can just fall back. It's good. But we just got, you know. But the question that becomes is, what is our relationship with these artists? Do we really know them, or do we think we know them? Are we speculating, or have we sat down and had a conversation with them to understand what they're doing? And I'll close with this. There's a brother named Cedric Muhammad.
That's my guy.
Yeah, Cedric. Cedric was the first to write about this in great detail. You know, when people were coming at like Wu-Tang and others and saying they needed to do this, that, and the other. And he's like, what's your relationship with them? Do you support them? Did you buy their album? Did you do? He laid all this out. If you go back and look at his writings, but what was crazy is that when I read Marcus Goodlow's book, right, and he's talking about King and how King was methodic in cultivating those relationships with Black music artists and Black entertainers. You know, one thing he said, King was a supporter. You know, he just didn't show up. He's like, Keem, I listened to your record. No, I just didn't listen to it just before the meeting. I have all 5 of your albums. I know you more than just Mad Izms, right? I know when you did the mixtape. I know when you did, you know, he walked in the room like, nah, I really checked for you. And so the relationship was one, oh man, you checking for me like that? Man, what do you need, Dr. King?
Gotcha.
Here's a piece of paper. Look. If they ever come to you and ask you what defund the police means, this is what it means.
Right. So
you can speak intelligently, and if they start to get at you, you can tell them, holler at me over here. I don't need to be in the video with you. You know, I don't need to sit next to you. I just need you to do that. And a lot of those artists have done that over the years. Bun B would be somebody like that who can spit that, you know. I think Killer Mike, of course, T.I. and others.
Nah. So and you know, I think we, myself included, too many times are overly critical of artists, and I have to learn to step back and realize that, you know, that every artist should be allowed to create art. Period. Whatever that is, that's your artistic expression. but then it's understanding the machine that exists and what they're interested in highlighting and pushing and for what reasons. And I think today's conversation did a wonderful job in illustrating some of that, things that we don't necessarily focus on. There's one more thing I want you to talk about quickly if you can, and that is this whole defund the police issue, because I think people get shook and they don't understand that defund the police is a policy position that's been in place before the last year. It's like, this is something that's like in some places 20 years going. Activists, organizers, politicians have been, doing work around this concept of defund the police. And, people don't understand what it really means. They're using it as a red herring. And okay, there you go.
So let me explain it this way. And if you notice, one of the reasons why I'm a little long-winded is because I'm always shouting out and giving receipts. Mm-hmm. And that's important because of my position as being on the air in 10 cities and what have you. Mm-hmm. I like to think I'm an intelligent guy, but I also roll with a crew. Mm-hmm. Right. And there are people that when I speak, it's not just for me, but it's also to underscore the work that they're doing. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's important to know that. So with defund the police, there are people that I roll with, mm-hmm. Like the Anti-Police Terror Network with Cat Brooks and others, mm-hmm. who've been talking about this for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Right. That's just here where I'm at. Mm-hmm. And and so defund the police has a few roots. One root, it comes out of an abolitionist position of abolish the police. So there you have that part, because the police have always been seen as an occupying army that has not been helpful and useful for people here. The other thing to the policy position is understanding that a lot of our budgets are soaked up with the police having 50%, 40%, 60% of the general budget. And the question is, well, they have all this money. What are they doing? In many cities, you're saying, damn, there's a spike in crime, but you got 60% of the budget. How come you're not using this efficiently? What's going on here? So it was like, well, the police are spending a lot of time doing things that maybe other people could do. For example, they're going and they're talking to those who are mentally challenged, and oftentimes they're like 1/3 or 1/4 of the people that are shot by police. Maybe we need to send some other people to go deal with folks who have mental challenges versus the police, because they're not counseling. They're oftentimes trying to contain and be punitive. So let's redirect funds and have, some other people come and do what the police are doing, traffic stops and things like that. Maybe other people can handle that other than the police. That's one thing. From where I sit, one of the reasons that you had people in recent days call for defunding the police is because the police in many ways have absolutely refused at every single corner to allow themselves to be held accountable. When you said body cameras, they fought that. And in many departments, they don't even wear them. When you ask them to be like, can we open up the Policeman's Bill of Rights and find out who has abusive records that are on the force? They fought that. Can we have a decertification bill? Can we have a bill so that if we have abusive police that are beating on their wives and kids and, and abusing citizens, that they can't hold the license the same way that I couldn't hold a teaching license or you couldn't hold a teaching license if we were found to be abusive? They're like, no, we can't do that. So it was like, can we have a special prosecutor look into the police shootings? Can't do that. Every time you try to ask, for some sort of accountability, qualified immunity, can we not have that? They fought it at every turn. And so you have abusive police that jump from department to department, who it's almost impossible for them to be, fired, much less criminally charged. And this is on top of all the money that they've cost cities. In Oakland, it's $100 million over the past 15 years. In LA, it's like $200 million. In Chicago, it's some astronomical number from lawsuit settlements with the police because they have been abusive. That's on top of their budget. So I think people have been like, let's redirect the funds and use them more efficiently. If the police are going to fight violent crime, then let them be freed up to go fight violent crime, not stop people who smoking weed, not stop people who have a mental breakdown. Let's redirect the funds and put them in other coffers. And that's really, in essence, what defunding meant. It wasn't like getting rid of the police altogether, although there is a strand and there are people that come out of that school. I think most people have been like, no, we got to use the money more efficiently and more effectively. And we can't have, our budgets being ballooned to 50% with the police. That makes no sense. And as, Kat Brooks, who heads up the Anti-Police Terror Network, pointed out yesterday, said they got the money now. There ain't been no defunding. And you talking about there's a spike in crime. Well, dude, you got tanks, you got drones, you got all kind of things. So, I mean, what are you doing? You spent $32 million on overtime?
Right.
For what? Oh, $32 million on overtime to police demonstrations that derived from people on your force that were abusive to folks, because you didn't want to have a mechanism where we can hold people who are abusive accountable. So then they wound up killing somebody, and now we have everybody walking the street. Remember, that's the whole thing with Derek Chauvin, the guy who killed George Floyd, which is why we had all the demonstrations. He had not one, not two, not three. He had 26.
26.
Complaints, of abuse against him. The other cop, the Asian guy, had 6 and was being sued at the time that George Floyd was killed, right? That's 32. Like, you were a teacher, right? You were a teacher, am I right?
That's right.
Now, you answer this question to me. Let's say Hakeem Green got arrested for smoking weed on his way to school. Let's say it happened twice. Would you have been allowed to show up in the classroom? Even with they would have been like, you're a bad influence on it. And this is a smoking weed.
Absolutely not. And I'm a weed smoker, and I don't want my teacher smoking weed. Just like I don't want the person teaching my children smoking weed, but I damn sure don't want the person who's been hired to protect me killing my son or daughter. Right.
So I'm just using that as an example. They would have brought you in and said, my man, you teaching these kids, we're gonna have to have you, might have to look and see if we can decertify you.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, that's just one thing. Let's just go internally. Let's say you are found to yell at your students all the time and you're not effective with your teaching. That piece of paper you have, it's like you're not qualified to teach anymore, right? Am I right or wrong?
That's right. Absolutely.
The police can beat their wives, beat their kids, beat citizens in the street, and you can't decertify them.
Yeah, the profession with the highest rates of domestic violence is law enforcement.
Yeah.
One thing I want to close out on with this whole defund the police thing, I looked up successes with defund the police. And the first thing that comes up is how Camden disbanded their police 7 years ago. Now, I've heard that there was some political reasons why that happened, so forth and so on. But when you Google successes for defund the police, the first thing that comes up is how they disbanded the police in Camden, and then all the statistics that go along with the improvement in quality of life.
Well, look what they're doing in Newark with Ross and Achille.
Yeah, Civilian Review Board. The Newark, New Jersey, a major U.S. city, has a Civilian Review Board. Like that,
which the police unions took to court to try to defang, and they did. They got it ruled so it could be defanged. So again, rather than be held accountable, you will fight tooth and nail to avoid accountability.
Right. So I don't know if the viewers can see, but in the production studio, I look like I'm breaking up. So I don't know if it looks the same way you're in.
Oh yeah. But it looks kind of fly.
Yeah, I'm breaking up. So yeah, but man, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and a lot of the things that I've been wanting to discuss with you on a platform like this, we actually touched on and gotten into some detail. For the listeners and the viewers out there, I mean, you've just been blessed with some jewelry. Big shout out to Davey D for taking the time with Mad Izm TV, man. And this is This is great. You know, any
Hey man,
final shout outs for them?
I like that effect, man. You know, when I DJ online, I
Oh,
need to
yeah.
figure out how you did that.
Yeah. I'll put you on. As soon as we end this, I'll get offline and let you know what you know.
What was it? Was it a wire was frayed or something like that? Something wasn't working correctly?
Well, it's I'm in a room where I can't really control the lighting, right? So it's the lighting, so it's having an effect. If you notice, because I had the window open, the shade, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the light was cutting through the shade, so you could see the background, kind of the effect of it on it. So I went and shut the shade. I walked away, shut the shade, and it fixed it. But now because it's getting darker outside, it's losing.
Right.
You can see.
But it looks like some superhero thing, man.
Like,
you know,
yeah. I'm gonna what do you call this? Star Trek.
Something like that. You know. You
know,
you need
when they get in a joint and they dematerialize and end up somewhere else. I'm gonna end up in New York in a few.
Hey, do you do all the science fiction stuff?
I'm not a big heavy guy like that, but some of it I follow. Why?
No, I was I like The Mandalorian.
You know what? I'm going to take the time and just binge watch everything for like, I guess, a month now because there's so many episodes, but I've been hearing great things about it.
But I also was a big fan of Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
And so that season ended. And then I'm watching Mandalorian last night, and I go, wait a second, that's Agent May. She's on. So, after you binge watch somebody.
When they jump around in different projects. Oh, that's
you feel bad, like, damn, man, that was a good run, man. And then, like, I looked and one of the characters was in there. I was like, oh, man.
Right.
So that's just me geeking out on some science fiction stuff. I was happy to see, one of my favorite shows, one of the characters resurfaced.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, man. But again, salute to you, Davey D.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, we'll have you on again pretty soon, whenever you got the time to sit down and chop it up with us. And just final shout outs for the folks, how they can follow up with you, what they should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, Mr. Davey D at Gmail, Mr. Davey D on IG, Mr. Davey D at Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, just one thing as we close out, there are a few people that just came to mind since we were talking about, artists and politicization.
Mm-hmm.
Your folks from East Orange, Naughty in them.
Naughty by Nature.
Yeah, I didn't realize they was on the transition team for the mayor and all that. They were doing things over there, man.
They got a really interesting story from that perspective. Like, I grew up with these guys, and I see them one way, but the story of their street, it was hectic for them, and how law enforcement kind of targeted them and went after them.
Yeah, I remember.
Real crazy in the city. When we were first coming up, didn't really hop on the Naughty by Nature wave because they were looked at as, thugs and criminals and the outcasts of society. Vinny, if anybody knows Vinny, is like a business genius, a marketing genius. KG, of course, is a production. He's, was a super producer at one time. Tretch, of course, is like a big star. He's an icon. He's like the brilliant. It's like you have these guys and the options that they had for them were their talents, and they made something of themselves, and the city didn't embrace it. Right now, to see, 20, 30 years later, Ted Green is somebody I went to school with. He's a little older than me. He's the current mayor, but that hip hop generation really taken hold. Vinny is just the perfect conduit. Vinny's just the man. Like, so that connection with the politics is like, it just makes so much sense. And yeah, Naughty's incredible.
But it's good to see them, roll that high.
Yeah, no doubt. We look at the Naughty by Nature brand and what they're doing with it. They got a new project, Sluggerville, a record label with KG and Vin, and they got it's about to be really major for them. They got the Naughty by Nature is the contract with Major League Baseball, so it's like Yankees by Nature, Reds by Nature. This is all Vinny, and this the three of them, just them making it happen. Yeah. And that Naughty by Nature brand 30 years later is like stronger than it ever was.
And just think, man, when I grew up in the Bronx, we used to laugh at Jersey. Now we better not.
Big shout out to Latifah and Shakim.
Yeah.
Big shout out to them, because when you look at what they're doing over on the West Coast right now.
Right.
You know, that's something extra special. So yeah,
Yeah,
Jersey got a lot to be proud of.
Oh no, you're your own entity.
Yeah.
You're no longer in the shadows. You know what I mean? It's
That's
like
right. Yeah.
It's like, where you from? I'm from New Jersey. No, not New York. Say Jersey, son.
Jersey. Yeah. And Roz Baraka and Mini Baraka, that's hip hop. Do It All is hip hop. He just ran for city council. He's very
That's right. Yeah.
In New Jersey. Like, you know, so hip hop, you know, is making some major steps in some big ways. And, you know, I'm proud of what we're doing. I'm very proud of what we're doing. Yeah.
I am too. You know, like I said, it used to be when you come to the Bay Area, you know, you talk to somebody from Oakland. No, I'm not from the Bay Area. I'm from Oakland. I'm from Oakland, you know. And now I'm seeing that Jersey has now got that swag.
Yeah.
Not New York. No.
I'm Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey. No doubt.
With receipts.
Mm-hmm.
Receipts. Good music. But then the activism has stepped up, man. You need to just have a Jersey day.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's 24 hours apiece. That's what we're going to do. 24 hours apiece is going to become Jersey Day.
Is it really?
Watch.
Okay.
Watch. Because the whole Jersey needs 24 hours apiece. So we're going to make it that. And it's 24 hours, a whole day. So it just makes sense. We're going to make that happen.
Who's the governor? Who's the governor now?
Phil Murphy.
Is he good, or what's the deal with him?
You know, is he good? Is
he better than Chris Christie?
Oh, yes. I'll put it to you like this. He's in lockstep with Roz Baraka, or Roz Baraka is in lockstep with the governor. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Like, Roz Baraka was, you know, very influential in that in the governor's run. So yeah, so far so good, you know. But with the lockdown, and there's so much discontent with this coronavirus and the lockdown, it's just you know, he's taking a lot of undue weight. It's just like the conversation we had. Switch gears, but I got you on about Kamala Harris and her prosecutor, attorney general. You know, now she's the vice president elect, and her reputation. You know, a lot of folks are mad at her, and in talking to you, someone who's from that area, who's got the receipts, who knows how it went down, it brings clarity to what she really represents. And just on the outro, because I know you said in closing 20 minutes ago, just on the outro, can you give some clarity to, you know, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris?
Yeah, I mean, you know, she was a prosecutor, so let's just put that there. And prosecutors do what prosecutors do, right? But in terms of the vitriol that emerged, where folks put the narrative out that she was locking up hundreds of people, that was not the case. You know, the rub on her, if that was the case, you know, start showing those articles from the 4 times that she ran for statewide office and then later senator. The rub on her, where people really had issue, was that she didn't prosecute cops, you know, even when people like Mario Woods and people were killed in her district. So that was that. Then it was a thing like, you know, the thing with the marijuana thing. And what was overlooked was that was something that was being dictated by the mayor at the time, which was Gavin Newsom, not her. And then it was the other thing about how many people she locked up. And when you did the math, it was maybe about 3/4 less than her predecessor, who was actually a diehard progressive prosecutor. His name was Terrence Hallinan. So, you know, she is not without blame and not without critique. You know, there's a lot of critique I definitely have had at her, and I have my articles, you know, stating such. But, you know, the thing about the narrative that was painted was more of a narrative that came from the right wing, and then it was cemented in certain factions, and it just wasn't as accurate as it needed to. You know, wasn't accurate, period. And if it wasn't the thing that people were fighting for or around when she ran, not from prosecutor, but when she ran for attorney general twice, and then when she ran for Senate. You know, start showing those articles where the narrative that she has now, start showing where that came up, where she's locking up all the black men. Pull them out. You know, go Google, look at them. You know, I'll give you all the newspapers. You can look at the Post, the Bayview, you know, K-Poo, you know, you can, you just don't see that. And during her run is when you have like Oscar Grant, and you have a lot of conversations. So you have a politicized mass that's there. So if this was the issue, then that should have been a thing that would have tanked her easily when she was running. But it didn't, and it just didn't come up that way. But like I said, the real rub on her was Mario Woods, what's dude's name? Andy Lopez, 13 years old. Some cases that were down in Bakersfield where you had crazy police. And the police didn't like her because she wouldn't prosecute somebody to go to death. And then the community was mad at her because, like, dude, you know, like you're the attorney general. Can you step in and mitigate this? And she was just silent. And at that time, I felt, you know, said she looks like she's getting ready to run one day for president, which she did, you know. And I think, you know, her campaign should have been one where she should have been able to rebuff that criticism. So I don't know what was going on. She should have been easily, you know, she should have been able to rebuff that easily, and she just didn't. But that wasn't wasn't the flag that we were riding on with her like that.
You know, and just to state for the record, because I got duped by the right wing for a minute. I was in the grasp of some unsavory characters from the Tea Party right, you know, with their conspiracy theory narratives, and you were the one who like kind of pulled my coat and been like, yo, dude, like I'm telling you, it's not what it seems to be. And you know, they definitely have a way of framing certain narratives to turn you against your greater interest, right? Know? And they definitely got me. So I see when you say what they did to her in terms of creating this narrative that really wasn't, you know, the case, right? You know, and how people fell in. I see exactly what happened.
And it made sense, except, you know, like, you know, the Bay Area speaks for itself. You know, they're very clear. That just, you know, that just wasn't the thing. And I think the one thing that they brought up was Jamal Truelove, right? So he was somebody who was actually falsely
accused, falsely
accused,
in
prison. Yeah. And he even came out and he's like, look, you know, if anybody got beef, I can have beef with her. Because it was on her watch that it went down. Right. And he endorsed her, you know? So he was like, I'm endorsing her. I didn't, you know, a lot of people didn't even do that, you know, and he's the one that actually has some marks on the back. So, yeah, you know, I don't want to be her defense.
Right now, I
think she had more than enough resources.
No, but you just added some clarity.
But there was some context to stuff.
Yes, context. You know? So you don't, you know, because we get these articles online and we see things framed a certain way, and you know, to some degree there's some truth to it, but when you put it in context, it's like, well, they're lying. That's a lie. That's not actually what happened, you know. And we see that with Breitbart, with Shirley Sherrod, and you know, with the Obama, the same thing, you know. So
there's an article I wrote in the SF Bayview in 2015 about when she was the Attorney General. Well, I think she had just got to the Senate. About the issues we had with her, Mario Woods. So you can read that. That's online. You know, where's Kamala Harris in the shooting death of Mario Woods. But there's a couple of articles, one that comes out of the SF, the San Jose Mercury. And I want to say there was another one that came out of
San Jose Mercury.
Yeah, there was another. Yeah, that's the one that broke the story about the CIA and crack.
Yeah,
I wrote columns for that. Yeah, Gary Webb.
Yeah,
we did his first interviews.
Whoa.
Yeah, his first interviews was with our show.
And I remember the interview you did with the brother that Spike Lee did the movie about.
Ron Starworth.
Yeah,
we did the first.
He came out, I was like, oh man, he put me up on him 5 years ago.
Yeah. We did the first interviews with him.
Yeah.
The original Hip Hop Cop. We didn't do it because of his Klansman thing. Because he has like 6 books dealing with hip hop. But yeah, you know, the San Jose Mercury goes back into I want to say 2013 or 2014. You could start seeing articles where they broke down, you know, at the time they were breaking down some of her record, so you could see that for yourself,
Yeah.
or they link to it. So
Yeah.
I just don't want to be like I'm just talking. Like
No,
go
and
look it, go read it.
there was a whole thing with what's his name, the current Secretary of the Treasury, Uninson, or how do you say his name? Munchkin.
Oh, yeah.
So he was with the what's the name of the banks that he also was it SunTrust or City Sun?
Yeah.
And he got caught up with some illegal whatever, and it was supposed to be a slam dunk case, and Kamala was expecting Kamala to take him and do him in, and she declined to take and a lot of people said that it was a slam dunk case. Like, how can you not? And was there a deal? Was there something, a favor?
So you're talking about when the loan things happen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna say this. Talk to your boy Barry. The guy who told us not to defund the police.
Right.
That's because at that time, when he cut a deal and everybody's like, really? She was one. Go back, you can look at the paper. She was like, hell no, I'm going hard. I'm gonna go hard. I'm gonna start going. I'm slashing and burning, and then the next thing you know,
wow,
silence. It was like, okay,
See, yo, your man, Michael Moore is like a genius to me for that whole Flint, Michigan shit.
Yeah.
Woo! You had to welcome
when Barry didn't drink the water.
Ooh, like you didn't even have to set that up. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to go there. You could have just went in, did your speech, calm people down,
and bounce.
This nigga, he went, I think I need a glass of water. Not bottle. No. I want it from the tap. Why are you doing that, bro? Why? You don't need to. You can just come in, be Prince Charming, and give him the Heisman Trophy pose.
Yeah.
I gotta.
Yeah. So phone calls were made. Anyway, let me bounce on out of here, my brother.
Yes, sir, bro. I appreciate you so much, fam. Davey D. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
My guy.
Take care now.
One
Peace.
love.